Gabby Giffords will be handing in her resignation. There will be tributes paid by Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House John Boehner, and also Representative Debbie Wasserman-Schultz. You can watch it live. The proceedings getting underway momentarily live here on C-SPAN. Thanks for being with us on this Wednesday.
The House will be in order. The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., January 25, 2012. I hereby appoint the Honorable Jason Chaffetz to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, John A. Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
The prayer will be offered by our chaplain, Father Conroy.
Let us pray. We give you thanks, O God, for giving us another day. As you make available to your people the grace and knowledge to meet the needs of the day, we pray that your Spirit will be upon the members of this people's house, giving them the richness of your wisdom. Bless the members of the minority party as they gather these days. May they, with those who accompany them, travel safely and meet in peace. Bless also the majority party as they return to their constituencies. Give them hearts and ears to listen well to all those whom they represent. May the power of your truth and our faith in your providence give them all the confidence they must have to do the good work required for service to our nation. May all that is done this day be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Cicilline.
Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair will entertain up to 5 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, my grandmother used to say that there is nothing more powerful than a woman that has made up her mind. Gabby Giffords has always been that woman. She is compassionate, tenacious, and relentless in her love for our country. Her desire to serve and represent the people of Arizona has never wavered, and she will carry that same feisty spirit with her indefinitely. After she was attacked and faced with what seemed to be insurmountable odds, Gabby fought each day to get better. Her recovery has been a miracle, and she will only continue to get stronger. Gabby is the spirit of bipartisanship that we should all learn from, and I've enjoyed working with her on border security issues. She makes decisions based on what she seems to be right for her people. And although she will no longer serve in Congress for the time being, the people of Arizona have not lost an advocate. No question about it, Gabby is a fighter, and she fights for what she believes in. She is fiercely dedicated to making her community and our country a better place, because she is a woman that has made up her mind, and that's just the way it is. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island rise? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents in Rhode Island have been hit hard by this recession. Last night, President Obama offered Congress a plan to rebuild our economy with proposals focused on manufacturing, innovation, investments in infrastructure, and workforce training, proposals that I and many of my colleagues have been working hard to advance. I urge my friends on the other side of the aisle to move forward on the Offshore Prevention Act that would end tax breaks for companies that ship American jobs overseas. We should work together to strengthen American manufacturing by passing legislation such as my Make It in America block grant and the rest of the Make It in America agenda. I look forward to fighting hard for common sense proposals like these that will benefit hard-working families in my state. Rhode Islanders want Congress to move beyond ideological differences to get things done for our country. After so much unproductive partisanship this past year, let's send the President bills like these that will advance not just the interests of Democrats or Republicans, but of every American family. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to extend my remarks.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the Constitution gives Congress the responsibility
of providing for a common defense. The defense cuts that occur in 2013 as a result of sequestration undermines this constitutional duty. General Ray Odierno, the Army Chief of Staff, has stated, quote, "Cuts of this magnitude would be catastrophic for the military," end of quote. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta has said that under sequestration, quote, "We would have to reduce the size of the military sharply. Rough estimates indicate after 10 years of these cuts, we would have the smallest ground forces since 1940, the smallest number of ships since 1915, and the smallest air force in our history," end of quote. With growing worldwide threats, the President last night praised our troops, but actually is slashing the Army by 80,000 troops and cuts the Marines by 20,000. I urge my colleagues to support Chairman Buck McKeon and vote in favor of the Down Payment on National Security Act. This bill provides certainty for the military to promote peace through strength. In conclusion, God bless our troops who will never forget September the 11th and the global war on terrorism.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York rise? Gentlewoman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, exactly 12 hours ago, those of us who sat in this chamber watched raw courage walk through that door when our colleague Gabby Giffords came in here of her own accord. She overcame obstacles, both physical and emotional, that few of us can ever imagine. In this room, we often find similar challenges. And I call on this body in the spirit of Gabby Giffords to put aside our differences and work together and institute the parts of the President's plan we heard last night that we all agree on. I sat over here on the so-called Republican side of the aisle, and I know there were times when my colleagues, all of them, got up and applauded and supported the President's initiatives, whether it's to bring back jobs from overseas, whether it was fairness in our tax codes, or how about infrastructure back for our roads and bridges that are crumbling, at least in my district. We have much before us, just as our friend Gabby did. We can overcome it. She did it. We must. The American people are counting on us. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas rise?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, last night in this very chamber, I heard the President talk of an all-of-the-above energy strategy for our nation. I couldn't agree more. But, Mr. Speaker, this is the same President who a few days ago rejected the Keystone XL pipeline project, a $7 billion trifecta, shovel-ready for America. Jobs, energy security, and urgent logistical relief necessary to move oil to the Gulf Coast region. Count me as one of the disappointed, Mr. Speaker, at a time when we should be doing everything we can to give American workers a lift. Instead, we take to the bully pulpit and preach envy and division, simply a smokescreen for political convenience and expedience. Mr. President, if you truly believe in an all-of-the-above strategy, if you're genuinely concerned about 8.5% unemployment, and if you're looking for a bipartisan way to reverse this economic course we're on, say yes to Keystone XL, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The Chair will remind the members that they are to address their comments to the Chair. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky rise?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I was very pleased last night to hear President Obama talk about the defining issue of our time, the great economic disparity that we face in this society, and the need to have a fair taxation system. Of course, what's fair is in the eye of the beholder. And the recent disclosure of Governor Mitt Romney's tax returns offers us a great laboratory to talk about that. On $21 million in income, he paid $3 million in taxes. The question for us shouldn't be whether $3 million is fair or whether 13.9% rate is fair. The question is, did he deserve a preferential rate? Did that $21 million of income educate anyone? Did it create jobs? Did it provide important research? Did it build infrastructure? If it provided a societal benefit, a broad societal benefit, then that preferential rate is justified. If not, then we can't explain to hardworking Americans how he pays a lower rate than they do. Fairness is incredibly vital to the survival of our society.
Time has expired.
And we need to emphasize that always. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma rise?
I request permission to address the House in unanimous
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today is day 1001 since the Senate has passed a budget. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, the President has notified this body that his budget will also be late this year. Now, that may be a couple days, it may be a week. We don't know exactly how late that's going to be exactly at this point. And last night during the State of the Union address, he spent exactly 3% of the speech talking about debt and deficits. We have $15.3 trillion worth of debt right now in our nation. It is a major issue for us. It slows down our economy. I was very pleased to hear him talk about an all-of-the-above energy strategy, though, and I'm very focused on that exact same thing. But I did have a couple things that need to be cleared up. He mentioned basically the hydraulic fracking and the process of recovering shale gas was a federal project and a federal invention. Well, I'd like to inform everyone that since 1949 we've done that in Oklahoma. And the chemicals that he mentioned, we need to get out there and stop concealing them. If you go to fracfocus.org, Mr. Speaker, you will already find all those hydraulic chemicals out there. So we need to clear those things up.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee rise?
Address the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night was the State of the Union, but it was also the state of the American family. For family values were much on display like I have never seen before in this room. We had the President of the United States and his beautiful wife, Michelle, who have a beautiful family and certainly exhibited family values. And we had Gabby Giffords and her marvelous husband, Mark Kelly, who have shown family values. Two couples in America that are beautiful and have shown what vows mean and what for better or worse mean. They know a marriage is forever. They also are great Americans that want to bring this country together. And the President properly said our country is great. We're doing better. We have improved since the Bush years in so many areas and are putting our country on a course toward economic employment, preservation of the middle class, shared responsibility, and fairness. I urge everybody in the spirit of family values that the President and Representative Giffords and their families exhibit to join together as an American family and move this country forward and keep America number one. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise? Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night, President Obama asked Congress to support his same failed policies that have kept unemployment above 8%. This administration has caused our economy to fail. The House has passed more than 30 bipartisan bills that will create American jobs, but the Democrat-controlled Senate has failed to move on 27 of them. It's time for the Senate and the President to get behind these common-sense bills that will boost job growth, cut spending, shrink the deficit, and get the government out of the way of small business. Just last week, the President rejected the Keystone Project, which would create tens of thousands of jobs, draw billions of dollars in new investment to the United States, and increase our domestic energy security. America's energy independence should be a top priority for the White House. Americans want, need, and deserve immediate action on these bills and the Keystone Pipeline. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota rise? Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to congratulate the Egyptian people on their revolution 1 year ago today. Of course, that revolution is still a work in progress, but it reminded us of what people can accomplish through nonviolence and perseverance. It inspired my constituents and people around the world. Egyptians disproved the myth that people in the region do not want democracy. Protesters in the street were not asking for another dictator. The nonviolent protest was a stunning rejection of violence and extremism as exhibited by Al-Qaeda. They were also not blaming others for their problems. Their demands focused primarily on internal issues like the economy, corruption, and police brutality. The United States must engage the new Egyptian government. We can't advance our interests and values if we don't. If the new parliament doesn't deliver, the Egyptian people will throw them out just like our people will throw us out. That's democracy. As they build theirs, we should remember that we're still perfecting our own. I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on the motion to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or on which the vote incurs objection under Clause 6 of Rule 20. Any record vote on the postponed question will be taken later. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3801.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3801, a bill to amend the Tariff Act of 1930 to clarify the definition of aircraft and the offenses penalized under the aviation smuggling provisions under that act and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Reichert, and the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, will each control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, as a former sheriff, I rise in strong support of H.R. 3801 because it would address the increasing use of ultralight aircraft in the smuggling of contraband across our borders. We also move this bill today in honor of Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, sponsor of this bill. She ably represented Arizona's 8th congressional district since being elected to the United States House of Representatives in November of 2006. In fact, our offices were next door to each other when she first arrived in Congress, and we had an opportunity to walk and talk and share some stories, and I learned from her that she came to Congress for the right reasons. She is concerned about her constituents and cares and loves this country deeply. So we got to know each other just a little bit, and one of her foremost concerns has been the safety of her constituents. This bill is but one way in which she addressed those concerns, working together with her good friend and tireless colleague, Representative Flake. I'm delighted that we can move this bipartisan bill. We look forward to the day when Gabrielle fully recovers. The use of ultralights, which are small, slow, highly maneuverable, single-seat recreation air vehicles, is a proven way to smuggle contraband. These planes fly at a very low altitude and do not even have to land. They simply drop their bundles of contraband at a predestined point and fly back undetected. A sheriff in Luna County, New Mexico, was quoted as saying that we need the ability to detect smugglers' flights before they cross the border, to track them and give us a good indication of where they're dropping their contraband so that we can pre-position our response teams. This legislation provides the tools to stop these smugglers from using ultralight aircraft. First, the bill adds ultralights to the definition of aircraft for purposes of smuggling and stiffens the penalties for using this type of aircraft to smuggle contraband. Secondly, it enhances the ability of U.S. Customs and Border Protection to detect, track, and halt illicit trafficking across the international borders between the United States and Mexico and the United States and Canada by calling for a collaborative effort between the Department of Defense, Customs, and Border Protection. For these reasons, I'm in favor of expanding our abilities to combat smuggling and support this bill. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Michigan.
I yield myself such time as I shall consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
I rise very much so in support of the Ultralight Aircraft Smuggling Prevention Act of 2012. It's crucially important in 2 respects. It's important in and of itself. It's clear we need to act. Every year, hundreds of these aircrafts are flown across our borders. They're carrying drugs. Smugglers favor them because they're hard to detect. they're inexpensive, and they can often avoid radar detection. And so the problem is that under current law, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and the prosecutors don't have the authority to charge the users, these offenders, with the existing statute. And so they can't seek the higher penalties or lower the burden of proof. This bill, and this is the second significance, it was introduced by Representative Gabby Giffords, and it would close this loophole. And so I think for all of us, colleagues and friends, this is a special moment. This legislation was characteristic of the devotion, the dedication, the hard work of Representative Giffords, representing so ably the people of her district, the people of her state, and the people of our entire nation. Gabby Giffords has been a spectacular star in the congressional galaxy, and we say, as friends with love and affection, we know that that star will continue to shine brightly, and it will inspire us all. Gabby Giffords will be sorely missed, but the example of her dedication, of her vitality, and her courage, all of this has set an example that I think hopefully will lead us to undertake our duties with the same devotion as she has given to her work here and at home. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I understand that their side may have some additional speakers. We have one additional speaker and would yield to Mr. Levin to continue with further speakers on his side.
Thank you, the gentleman from Washington. It's my pleasure now to yield to another distinguished gentleman from the state of Washington, a member of our committee, and a distinguished member of our committee, Mr. McDermott.
For how much time will the gentleman be recognized?
3 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I urge members to support H.R. 3801, which is the Ultralight Aircraft Smuggling Prevention Act of 2012. This bill, as you've heard, will help prevent drug smuggling across our borders, and it does it really in 3 ways. It amends the current law to give our prosecutors the authority to charge smugglers who fly ultralight aircraft in the same way as they charge smugglers who fly conventional aircraft. Second, the bill adds both an attempt and a, quote, conspiracy provision to the aviation smuggling law. That means our prosecutors will be able to seek higher penalties when it makes sense. And finally, the bill directs the Defense Department and the Department of Homeland Security to collaborate in identifying equipment and technology that could be used by our customs officials to detect these ultralight aircraft. This is a common-sense piece of legislation that addresses a real problem and in a way that deserves broad bipartisan support. A very similar bill passed the House in the last Congress by a vote of 412 to 3. So this is a broad bipartisan bill. I expect this bill to pass with the same kind of bipartisan support today. What's unique about it is that it comes on the day when Gabby Giffords is going to resign from the Congress, the woman who brought this bill to the floor. And I want to congratulate her not only on this important piece of legislation, but for the impressive record she developed over the 5 years that she was representing the 8th District of Arizona. We all know Gabby's spirit well, She has an office down the hall from me, and I occasionally walked from office over here in the times when we came over to vote and got to know her on a human basis, and she is truly a wonderful woman, and we will miss her. She had a bright future before her here, and it's sad to us that she's leaving, but it's important for her to take care of herself. I'm a physician, I'm a psychiatrist, and I've seen cases like hers in the past and know that the possibilities for rehabilitation are very good, but it takes time. And running political campaigns and doing the kinds of things that you have to do in this business doesn't give you much time to take care of yourself. So we want Gabby to go home and take care of herself and return to her highest level of ability, because she has much to offer the people of the state of Arizona and her husband and the country. So it's with a great deal of sadness that we say goodbye to her, but on the other hand, we're very happy for her, and we very much urge everyone to vote for this bill. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Flake, and also take a moment to recognize him for his continuing efforts and dogged determination to ensure the safety of our country's borders.
For how much time is the gentleman recognized?
3 minutes.
The gentleman's recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I rise today in support of this legislation, and it's been described, and it will help. It is needed on the border to close this loophole, to make sure that we can better protect that border. I also want to pay tribute at this time to my friend and colleague, Gabby Giffords, for bringing this bill forward, for her work on this over the years. I've traveled to the border many times and meet with those property holders there, particularly the ranchers, the Glens, the Lads, and others that she knows so well, that she has worked with over the years to develop legislation like this and the other legislation and initiatives that she has pushed to make sure that we have a secure border. She met with these groups and then committed to have conference calls routinely to make sure that she was hearing their concerns, and she did so over a long period of time. And I can tell you, those who reside at the border, those who live there, who have property there, who work there, who have been there for generations, appreciate so deeply the work that she has done over these years. I want to pay tribute also to her family, especially her good husband Mark, for this difficult and challenging year, for supporting her and for making sure that she had what she needed and that she is recovering. What a wonderful story they have together and will continue to have. And also want to pay tribute to Gabby Giffords' wonderful staff. This has been a challenging year for them, and they have done everything possible to ensure that the people in the 8th District have received the representation that they deserve. They've worked long hours under difficult circumstances and have made sure that those constituents were well served. I was down in Sierra Vista earlier this week, or last week, and spoke to many of her constituents who recognize the efforts of Gabby and her good staff in this difficult time. We, as the Arizona delegation, will miss her in Congress deeply. We are so appreciative of the service that she has rendered, and we know that she will continue to serve, whether in the future it is an elected office or in whatever capacity. She will continue to serve the good people of Arizona and this country. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
I continue to reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman continues to reserve his time. Gentleman
It's
from
now
Washington.
my privilege to yield 3 minutes to a gentleman who's been very much involved in issues relating to this bill, Mr. Reyes of Texas. 3 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. And like my friend and colleague from Washington, I too rise in support of this legislation, H.R. 3801, as a former federal law enforcement officer, retired Border Patrol agent, Border Patrol chief, who had the opportunity as a co-chair of the Border Caucus to work very closely with Gabby Giffords. And it's a real privilege to be able to support this piece of legislation, which, as my colleague from Washington mentioned, has previously passed the House, and it's my understanding has already passed the Senate. So I urge all my colleagues to support it. I too would like to pay tribute to Gabby Giffords, because not only did I get a chance to work with her on border issues as members of the Border Caucus, but also as members of the Interparliamentary Group, and wanted to make sure that we know that we're not counting out Gabby. I think those of us that know her, those of us that have had the privilege of working with her, understand that she is determined to make a full recovery. We all will miss her, but we certainly agree with the decision that she has made, along with her husband Mark and her family, that she needs to take some time to fully recover. So we haven't seen the last of Gabby Giffords, I believe. I think whatever the future holds for her, she has made this a better place because of her work, because of her thirst to seek out the facts. This piece of legislation is just one indicator of the work that she has done on behalf of not just her constituents and not just her state, but a work done on behalf of our nation to keep us safe, especially post 9/11. So I hope today we have a unanimous vote of support for legislation that, yes, is needed, because I've been on the border with our Border Patrol agents and ICE agents and have seen some of these ultralights that this legislation addresses. But more than that, because we have to continue the fight against these drug cartels and these drug trafficking organizations. So I urge all the members to vote yes, and wish Gabby and her family well, and proud to have worked with her. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Michigan reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Washington.
I have no additional speakers, and I continue to reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Michigan.
I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
I thank the gentleman from Michigan, and I thank the manager of the bill, and rise today to support H.R. 3801. I serve on the Homeland Security Committee and know the importance of emphasizing, utilizing resources in a partnership, and in fact passing a law and authorization for that. We all know there's a firewall between a civilian government and its Department of Defense. And that's why I think this bill is particularly astute and particularly important, authored by our friend Gabby Giffords. I thank her for her thoughtfulness to ensure that as we put assets together, we have the act of law to ensure that it is properly done. As a member of a border state, or a resident of a border state, having been to the border many times, having walked the border from California to Texas, having been on the border at night, having been on the border with the Customs and Border Patrol, I can see what these assets can do to help stop the scourge of drug cartels and drug trafficking, and certainly make sure that those who come into this country come in for the right reason. But I also had the privilege of serving as part of the region that we are associated with in the structure of this Congress and served on the Steering and Policy Committee with our friend. I consider her a gift that keeps on giving to this nation. And I really do believe that as she pursues her own health issues, as she continues to espouse those values that she did when she was here, I think America's a great country, and she is an example of that. And her husband, Mark, who served so well in exploring our universe. We in Houston owe her a debt of gratitude, for you could not imagine the love and affection of Houstonians who had never met Congresswoman Giffords as she healed in our community. And so I would just like to...
Additional 15 seconds.
Gentlewoman's recognized for an additional 15.
So I'd like to say thank you to her and wish her well, and to say, as I've said before, she is an American hero because of the courage. And certainly we acknowledge those who lost their lives and those who were wounded on that tragic day. But what a symbol that this Congresswoman represents, this American represents, to all who seek a better place. I ask our colleagues to enthusiastically support H.R. 3801. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. Gentleman from Washington.
Still no additional members seeking time. I continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Michigan.
I guess we'll wrap up. I do so as I look about and think of this institution. It sometimes can be quite impersonal. I think for all of us today this is a very personal moment, and I think all of us join in saluting Gabby and Mark. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I keep my closing statement short. This obviously is an important bill to this country for our nation's security, and is especially important on this day when our good friend Gabrielle Giffords has presented her resignation. I urge all members to join me in support of this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3801? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is... Gentleman from Washington.
I request a recorded vote.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess for a period of less than 15 minutes.
The U.S. House going into a brief recess after debating what will be the last piece of legislation by Representative Gabrielle Giffords of Arizona. Over the weekend, she announced via her Facebook page that she is